Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to try to use our time efficiently. Unlike what it might seem as I'm just sitting here chatting, I'm going to get down to business. So, okay, it is noon 01 on my watch. So thank you so much everyone for coming. This is the third and final webinar, lunch discussion, I should say, on AI and how we're applying that. So I'm going to share my screen and start out with 10 or 15 minutes of presenting some ideas to think about on my end. And then I want to open up the floor for conversation. And so while I'm going to point out a couple of things I do want to chat about when we have our group discussion, just in case you want to jot down a note of something you want to bring up or share, something along those lines, because it's going to be kind of rapid fire ideas. And then I'm going to ask for some feedback, and in case you forget which one you want to respond to, maybe you want to jot down what you would like to add in afterwards. So let me share my screen here, pull up my presentation I want to show, and then I'll share my screen. We've been really focused on students and their use of AI in the classroom, and I think that's a critically important discussion, but I wanted to change the focus a little bit to us as faculty, just for today as we discuss. So one thing is I was doing a little bit of research for some things that would work well to share today that caught my eye, and I feel like I could have been guilty of violating this if I hadn't come across it and thought through it, is in most things that I interact with, I do think a lot about student privacy. I never send emails to lots of people copied on that have anything to do with a student's grade, or, the standard things that we've all been trained on many, many times, and we know to be aware of. But it's also really important not to enter any sensitive data into AI. And just in case you want to have an example of how and when this might come up, if you're thinking, why in the world would someone do that? A lot of the AI tools like ChatGPT, for example, can make really cool charts and graphs and make sense of your classroom data. And if you see that students did X, Y, or Z, and you want to see if there's a trend over time, or you want to analyze your grade book, or all sorts of things like that, it's actually really good at those kinds of analysis and data opportunities, but you'd have to be really careful about the way you enter things, like clearing out all student identifiers, giving them numbers, getting rid of their names, calling them A, B, C, D, E, just anything that you would do if you were going to share data widely in another forum that you're already aware of. Putting that into ChatGPT puts it into a repository of information. And so that would violate student privacy regulations, just because that data goes, who knows where it goes to, work on their algorithms, everything that feeds in builds knowledge. And so just remember that if you are going to use AI, a tool in that, in that general area, just be really aware of sensitive student information, keeping anything confidential. So that's one of our jobs as faculty administrators if we are going to use AI. Oops. Next screen. Okay, so along those same lines, we all have talked a bit about, with our student-facing content, how we want to encourage students to use AI, make them aware of it, kind of get them job ready for the next step. But I also want us to think through what tools we share. If you haven't played around with it yourself and done some research to see what there is that, find out what you don't know. If these are good quality tools to be sharing with students, at some point we may want to think through some university standards for the kinds of AI tools that we do want to encourage students to use. Maybe we don't want to just open it up for anything that's out there, have your students use it. We might not have the knowledge as individuals to really sort through some of this stuff. So again, when I was researching, I saw other universities putting out cautionary information about some tools not having good security settings. Maybe some are providing lower quality information than others. So thinking through the AI tools we share with students, that might be more of a collective discussion, but just something to bring to our radar as faculty. We as faculty administrators probably want to talk to students about AI. This is a point that has come up quite a bit, but I don't think we have really settled on a uniform front for how how we want to present this message to students. Do we want to post it for them in announcements? Do we each want to share it in our own way with no real standardized, like, you should probably do this? Do we want to have a discussion prompt in every class that starts to introduce students to AI in the same way to familiarize them with, this is how the regs are going to be for this particular class, what applies. So we do want to talk to our students about AI. Right now, it's a little kind of, I don't know if loose and wiggly is the right term, but we haven't quite pinned that down as to exactly how, but the clock is ticking. So we need to think about what we're responsible for telling our students and start initiating that conversation. It may be that we all get to do it in our own way, or it may be that we do it in a more concerted university-wide way we've thought through. So we now have an AI policy that Wayne's been doing a great job of working through with lots of feedback from others. So policies get shared with students, all of our policies always, but we do know that students take in information a little bit better when they hear it directly from, you, the instructor. So should we be resharing that in every class? If so, how do we want to do that? So things for us to think about. As faculty admin, we want to, of course, apply the same standards of academic integrity that we ask of our students to our own practices. So we're not going to copy anything into what we don't want students to copy into assignments. We've already made that pretty clear. So we're going to apply the same things to ourselves, ideally, with our announcements, other materials that we share. I mean, we wouldn't copy another source. Not a single one of us in here would slap a few lines from a journal article into something and be like, yeah, I wrote this. So same thing applies to AI. It's great, lots of great AI tools out there. So we probably do want to use them for idea generation, but just like anything else, be sure to cite your use of AI. We've talked about this from a student facing point of view, but there are now APA standards for how to do that. So all the same teaching stuff applies. Best practices for ethical standards. We are a Christian university. We want to model that to the best of our ability. And I think it's actually a great idea to use AI in your announcements and other things like that and cite it so that students can see you doing it and students can see how to do it. And it can be a model for students. If you want to share a resource, say, hey, I found this using Chat GPT, throw in a little APA citation so they can see what that looks like, show them what you found, think through the content, that kind of thing. Just like anything else with teaching, modeling is probably the most powerful approach that we have. Just like we apply to our students, if we are going to do that, what I just said, we've had a lot of discussion about how AI just makes stuff up, makes up content sometimes, makes up references. So if we are going to do that modeling, we need to take the same responsibility for sorting through that content to make sure it's accurate. Maybe, even to the point where we've had a few discussions lately where AI can just straight up poach some copyrighted material and you don't even know. So if we are going to use that stuff as faculty in any of our content, we have to take that same responsibility. I thought this was interesting. I came across this when I was thinking about faculty use of AI. So lots of universities are going back to revisiting their faculty plagiarism policies. I'm not even certain we have a faculty plagiarism policy, say that tongue twister 3 times fast, on the books, other than, don't do it, clearly. But a lot of universities actually have formal policies in place around that. And so there's, all of us have seen the high profile faculty plagiarism problems over the years. They tend to make the news in the most embarrassing and prolific of ways for whoever is experiencing that. But these are becoming more and more prevalent in the age of AI with, as just doing some research, sorting through some very interesting articles about ways faculty are getting busted for, just inserting stuff from AI into their own research. So maybe it's worth a loop back for us to think about what are our expectations for faculty use of AI. We've talked about it quite a lot with students. Hasn't come up much for us, and maybe it doesn't need to, but just something to put on our radars. Just 2 more quick ideas here. So I know we're all very anxious to adapt our assignments. We've had some conversations about how We have many classes, several of which I teach myself, that I'm certain AI could do the entire course the way it's set up right now. So I'm very anxious to get some of those assignments adjusted a little bit. I want to move quickly on this, just like everybody else, but just a reminder that we want to probably as faculty, just, take a deep breath. We've got to address this. We've got to address it soon, but we need to have a standardized whole university approach to how we want to take on some of those adjustments. So it's not just a total hodgepodge. It's like a real plan. And I know that George is working a lot on that too, because we've had conversations about how to insert AI into learning in a meaningful way. So we are getting there. And then lastly, I think it's worth us thinking about what's our personal responsibility? How much do we need to know here? What kind of scholars of AI do we need to be? We probably have a good opportunity to speak into this ourselves now, because there are no really specific policies, but should we be trained on this as faculty? Is this our personal responsibility? Should the university provide us with training? Do we even want that? If you're not that into AI, some of us are more into it than others. Do you have any obligation to actually address this with your students, or can you just do what you did last year? So some things for us to think about there. So I will stop talking here for a moment, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can look at each other. But I'm hoping to get some reactions to some of that stuff. So I know a lot of you here have done a lot of your own work on AI and probably thought through many of these topics independently as well. So I want to open the floor up to see what kind of thoughts other people have. So we'll just have a few minutes of kind of free-for-all conversation. Whoever wants to weigh in on anything that came up and or something related, that would be amazing. And then after maybe 15 minutes or so, if there are a couple things we haven't touched on yet, I'll probably draw it back in and try to loop back there. So anyone want to open us up with some thoughts?
I'll start talking to at least get something triggered.
You got it,
good
Josh.
afternoon,
I was counting
everybody.
on you.
For words, right? I appreciate your overview, Joanna, on a lot of fronts. My day job, as some folks know, I work for an analytics company. We're starting to use more of the marketing term of AI now. We've been behind the game in marketing, but really AI is just statistics at the core. Even generative AI, it's predictions, it's finding matches between things. It's complex. So a lot of my personal thinking and perspective and training has been more around the principles, the ethical use of it, what data goes into creating any of these models. I mean, ChatGPT is the thing that keeps popping up in everybody's mind when it comes to AI. That is one particular product and one particular form of AI too. And I think that that's important. I think you kind of inferred that, but that's also really important. I was actually on a panel, a small internal thing on with 8 folks on Friday for the state of California on AI in mental health care. And also kind of the emphasis there was, let's not just focus on chatbots, for instance. That's one in some ways tiny use case compared to all the many ways AI can be useful. All that to be said, I have to admit, I actually haven't used ChatGPT. I haven't tried the generative AI approaches. I would love, I think to your question of, should LAPU offer training or something? I think it's a good idea. Tips, here's some things to try out if you want to explore it. I think it's a wise idea for our own edification and knowledge at minimum. I also, the part I struggle with, and you addressed it there, is the plagiarism that the AI can have. I'm a little less concerned in principle about the outputs in our context from what it gets trained on in contrast to other areas, especially in the arts. Frankly, a lot of the data sources that it's being trained on is violating intellectual property. I mean, it's not too fine a point to put on. And so that's been part of my hesitation too, honestly, of even testing it out for fun or whatever, is it's like the fundamental way they have gotten and trained a lot of these models is wrong. Some of it's illegal. Even if it's legal, a lot of it is unethical. George, you pointed out, it's out there, it's done. So you can't pull it back necessarily. But we also have an ethical responsibility of how we use these things. Even if we as the end user are doing everything right, where do we go from there? I put on my, in teaching research methods too, questions of what about research historically that was done incredibly unethically? There's ethical questions of, do you use the insights from that research or do you not? Because it violated so many problems. These are not easy answers, but I think that that's a piece I will say I wrestle with. And again, for generating ideas, syllabi, content in the context of faculty use, I'm not as concerned again about it inappropriately using IP to generate those pieces. A little bit of stream of consciousness, but hopefully that gets you started.
Yeah, that was great. There's a lot there to kind of unpack and work with. So I'm hoping someone will pick up on you there.
Do you think that schools should offer classes for students on how to use AI like ChatGPT?
Classes like a 3-credit course or just classes like now you're going into, some of your upper division courses and here's your 3-hour training module we want you to go through.
Kind of like a technology in writing kind of a course. I've seen that in other schools. They have a technology in literary studies or technology in writing, that sort of class. And then maybe stick in ChatGPT as one of the units in such a class.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea.
I saw that in someone else's, as I was going through someone else's syllabus or something like that, when you apply for jobs. And I've taught a class like that. It was called Technology in Society. And so I remember back then it was, is it ethical to have your boss look over your email or something like that? Or is it ethical for the computer to time how long you're on the computer to time how long? That's how long ago this was. They were still asking, is it ethical for the computer to watch over your work? Now it's done everywhere. And so today I think it's for teaching essay writing. The thing about essay writing is a student can then write a 5-paragraph essay on topic X. Make sure to put a thesis with 3 reasons as the first sentence, last sentence of the first paragraph, first sentence of the last paragraph. Then it comes out with a really good essay. I then sent it to one of my colleagues who said, wow, the name of we use Claude. That was, I did it on Claude. And he said, wow, Claude would do really well in my English class, that sort of thing. In other words, if he were to grade that essay, he would give it an A. So the danger of ChatGPT or Claude is some student will just input the prompt, then just cut and paste whatever output it generates and hand the output to the teacher without really doing any thinking whatsoever.
Thank you for that. And bringing it back to faculty and what we may need to do well and what kind of training we may need or not need, or some of the things we're thinking through from a faculty standpoint. Anybody else want to weigh in on anything that crossed your mind during that first part?
I just want to let you know there's a couple of questions that George put in the chat there. I don't know if you saw those.
Yeah, I saw those. Wayne, one of the questions I think I'm going to put to you, actually, if you don't mind me kicking this over to you, but I was talking about the AI policy you've been getting feedback on from people. So he is asking where that can be found. And I'd love to ask you also if you can follow up on what you see as faculty obligation to share that, how that's going to be shared with students, repeatedly, that kind of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. And thanks for the question, George. We are we're finalizing a policy related to AI, and particularly AI use by students, rather than the topic today, which is how we as faculty use AI. and I hope to be able to share that soon. As I said, we're finalizing it. Certainly at the latest, early in fall 1, we'll get that out to everybody. We've just been going through a couple rounds of revision and making sure we're not only giving some principles, but giving some practical tips as part of that policy in terms of how we can help students use AI well. In terms of training, I was going to save this for the end, but I'll mention it now. We also have scheduled a webinar, which Joanna has graciously offered to organize for us for the 28th of September at 10 o'clock Pacific time. So that will be an opportunity to focus on the topic of AI with a broader audience. It's open, the webinars, as you know, are open to stakeholders from other institutions. We've chosen the topic thanks to Gordon Jorgensen, Lions and Tigers and Bears and AI, a community conversation. So there'll be an announcement coming out about that tomorrow. The first invitation will be going out tomorrow. So that's something to look forward to. We do see it as a topic, and let me just add this one additional thought going back to the first comments about the policy. This is very much an evolving field. And so any policy we put out on this in the next few weeks will be subject to revision and change as everything changes and grows with the use of AI, and as we learn more and as we become better at it. I think Josh noted that the Turnitin says that they're 97% accurate, but we have a lot of skepticism about that. And there are any number of articles about the problems with AI detection tools that are out there in the market today. So it is something that at this point we can't be as certain about as we can be with plagiarism, where you can look up and see where the student copy this material from. AI generated text is not as easy to establish clearly, and so our policy statement coming out about AI, and particularly about student use of AI, will reflect that uncertainty and how we approach it different from the way we approach plagiarism.
Mm-hmm.
Will the new policy also cover how faculty can teach the usage of AI to students?
It's not part of the policy, Yvonne, but we are beginning to build that into some of the courses where it makes sense to do that. And Lisa's on the call here. She's welcome to contribute to the conversation, but particularly in some of the business courses, the use of AI is becoming a part of how people function, particularly in the area of marketing and generating ad copy and things like that. If a student doesn't know how to do that, when they go into the market, they will be at a great disadvantage. So we're actually building the use of AI as a tool into some of the courses where that makes sense. Not so much in writing essays at this point, but certainly in some of the business applications where it's
AI is great for PowerPoint. Like you would tell it to create a PowerPoint presentation about topic X, it will create all the slides for you, and then you just tweak it.
Yeah.
It does it in a few seconds.
Wayne, thank you for mentioning that webinar that's coming up. And Lisa, Craig, and George are all going to give little 5-minute training sessions during that time too. So I think it would be really cool. So like Wayne said, he's going to put out the announcement tomorrow. We're just finalizing the description, but 10 a.m. on Pacific on the 28th of September. I think it'll be a cool opportunity. And Lisa, I wonder if you would be willing to talk about what Wayne brought up that you're working on in business classes for just a second. Is that something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I mean, George and I actually have identified specific courses to prioritize for integrating AI, starting with digital marketing, the BS in digital marketing, where employers have an expectation that students, that they graduate, that employees know how to use AI as a tool. So you can imagine, I feel like digital marketing, it's used in content creation, it's used for predictive analytics. It's a lot of different areas. where it's very essential to have that skill set. Of course, we prioritized that particular program and also talked about the ethical use of AI. And we're starting to work through some of the other, some courses that are running now, some of the leadership courses that we're in the process of finalizing a degree, the BALL degree. We're using it as teaching students to use it as a collaborative tool for strategy development, marketing, strategic marketing, that type of thing. More to come, but that's just a few examples.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I think, it takes some pressure off of faculty to have more of that stuff being built in, because I think that is a question on all of our minds. Like, we know we need to do this. We're not entirely sure what to do. Anybody else feeling that?
Well, Joanna, I think for me, the main implication for us as faculty and course creators is designing the deliverables. And, George is already working on this, but the day of the very basic essay of content, that's dead. Okay. And we should, schools probably need to move beyond that level anyway, right? I look at what I've done on Chat GBT is basically Wikipedia on hemorrhoids, steroids. It gives you a little mismatch of stuff. It's not cited properly. It's a little synthesis. It's a starter. But I think deliverables that require greater critical thought, creativity, application, that's the way to go. I like what Lisa's talking about, and as well, that if it's a tool that's going to be used in that field, we need to train in it. But I don't feel inclined to teach it as a way to write English essays and content generation. I feel like our students do a pretty good job trying to game the system anyway, right? So I want them to be ethical. They're going to do it, but I don't feel inclined to help make their load any easier, to be honest. So
I was thinking of just using it as a way to brainstorm ideas.
Yeah.
If they're stuck on ideas, because that's what my colleague said. I asked him how would he use that ChatGPT, and he said if a student has writer's block, can't think of anything to write, then using ChatGPT to generate ideas to write about. I think that the whole evolution of the research essay is going to change. I think the whole idea of just writing an objective essay with just the facts, only the facts, will change. I think that in order to overcome AI, students will also have to add in their own personal perspective, their unique experiences. So I think that the field of teaching the essay will focus more on the narrative essay in order so that you could separate what's found in the AI with what the students think.
exactly. Yeah, I think probably, a lot of the 1 to 200 level courses where we've relied on summative essays, those need to be kicked up a notch or two in terms of blooms. But
Yes.
yeah, and we should probably have been doing this anyway. But yeah, creativity in the deliverables is a huge thing. So
the whole idea of what is an academic voice. In the past, it was just simply stating the facts and then you cite it. You still do that, but now it's going to have more of the students' unique experiences interweaved inside an academic essay. Even the most driest essays will now have somebody's unique experiences in order so that people will know that wasn't just AI generated.
Scott, thank you so much for jumping in there with those ideas. I appreciate you thinking through, how it impacts you as a faculty member. So I'm curious, anybody that we haven't heard from yet, are you kind of feeling pressure, nervous as a faculty member about how to incorporate AI, knowing you need to? What are your thoughts about doing that? Are you feeling confident? You feeling a little bit of anxiety? And if you don't want to address that question, maybe somebody we haven't heard from, what kind of training would you want? What kind of training would really benefit you, so we can start thinking through maybe how to offer some of that stuff? And the webinar community conversation, I think, is awesome. It's going to be an hour, we're going to have a chance to break some of this down, but is that sufficient training, I guess? Is there something else you can think of, maybe you've done elsewhere that really worked, that you could bring up to us for ideas here? Anyone want to pick up either one of those two things?
I'll mention something just as I've been listening to everyone participate. I love the direction we're heading and incorporating AI in course assignments. I know Lisa's talked about that. George and I have talked about that in his team whenever we've been revising classes. I wonder if one of the things that might be beneficial is whenever we have assignments that we incorporate AI requirements, that we have just very blatant parameters of what we want students to be doing with AI and what we do not want them to be doing with AI. And I think sometimes our instructions, depending on the age of the class, some are very much more ambiguous and a little broader, and some are more specific. But I think perhaps when you're creating parameters for AI, at least in beginning stages, as we're incorporating AI into classes, it might be beneficial to have a little bit more specifics again as to what we do want and what we don't want, to help both instructors and students. I'm thinking we might have to pull instructors up to this point and students are already there. So it might be helpful for both students and instructors.
Yeah, Shannon, I agree with you. Your visual is perfect. It's like, you're gonna have to pull me along a little bit because I could just keep doing what I'm doing. And students are like, I've been there for a long time now. Yeah. Thank you, Shannon. Great points. Anybody we haven't heard from want to piggyback on Shannon?
Hi. I'd like to add that I think I have a little bit of reservations, especially coming from more of the mental health side and the psychology side. I can see how ChatGPT and the AI is helpful for creating algorithms, understanding research method. But when you're asking a student to discuss their experience or how they would work with an individual who may have schizophrenia or severe mental illness, they can easily input that and receive a thorough written essay. And I know someone had mentioned that the perspective of what an essay would look like is going to change in the future, but I think maybe also it might be a case-by-case basis in the sense of what subjects AI or ChatGPT may be more beneficial versus another subject. So I think maybe that is something we might need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I think echoing Melissa's concerns, we do have a lot of tech savvy students, but we also have some that are behind. They're going back to school after many years. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago, I had a student literally mail his paper to my house, if you can imagine that. It's not distance learning, but so I just kind of wonder if some people will really be left behind. But I like the idea of parameters that, here's not just ethical, but an accepted use of it. But I just kind of wonder if it's going to have some people who are just laggards. They're just really getting blown away in this thing.
Yeah. Scott, maybe it makes the digital divide even bigger. I think that's a solid point. George, do you want to weigh in anything about, as we're talking about designing some of this stuff into courses? I know you're working your tail off on that right now. Is there anything you want to pop in here?
Really, I think Lisa covered it really well, kind of how we're approaching it and how we're just looking at a case-by-case basis of where it's needed because it's being used within industry. But it's powerful, and it's there's just so many different uses for it in course design, and we use it on the team already. And honestly, my favorite, I don't know, axiom, whatever it may be, but natural language processing has been being done in psychology since 1966 when we came up with, when they came up with ELIZA and found that people actually interacted with ELIZA better than individuals. So it's something that I think we really need to take a strong look at and see how we can lean into it and use it ethically and then help others ethically. And I would love about the training, I would love to be trained kind of tactically on it on different skill-based things such as writing effective prompts, things like that. Because if you write those prompts effectively, you can get a lot of good content to start with.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I do also think we should continue brainstorming about the training too, because, at a certain point, although, a lot of us here are trying our hardest to get up to speed on AI and know everything there is to know. There's like some really, really expertise trainers out there, and maybe that's something we look into, bringing in or something like that at some point. Maybe we don't even know what we don't know. So I like your point there. And what I liked about that comment, George, is that even though I would consider you certainly one of our in-house experts on AI tools and all that, like you bringing up a point about, what you don't know and you want to learn more. It's just that there's so much more to know out there. So I think we're just kind of chipping at the tip of the iceberg with what we've been doing for training. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Wayne in about 2 minutes to see if he wants to wrap it up. So Wayne, there's your fair warning. But before I do that, I know there's lots of people that are here that we haven't heard anything from. So we've got 2 minutes and absolutely no obligation to speak. If you're just kind of here to listen and pick up what you can pick up, that's awesome. That's cool. Thank you for coming. If you haven't had a chance to speak and there's something that you're doing, not doing, wondering about, want to weigh in on training, love to hear from you.
I would like to have offered a AI, the basics, I mean, I can spell AI, and that's about the extent of my experience with it. I'm not nervous or anxious or scared, but it seems to me that all of you have kind of gone out and learned on your own. And if that's not the case, then please share with us where your expertise or your experience or your knowledge and skills came from. But having said that, at a minimum, I would like to have some sort of training program that just gives all of us instructors the basics on AI. And if it's safe to load programs onto our LAPU provided laptops or computers.
Yep. Doc, I appreciate that. One of the things I like about you is that you are maybe one of the most experienced among us, and you still have so much humility and like, hey, I'm not scared. I just don't know. I really appreciate that comment, because I can guarantee that you are not alone in that feeling. And to just address what you said there. Yeah, I mean, everything I know about AI, I learned because I was curious and interested, and I did not learn through any sort of job related, information. So I think those of us who are kind of like, oh, maybe we want to figure this out, we're totally doing it on our own, in our own way, in our own style, on our own time, that kind of thing. You're not missing anything unless I'm missing it too. So yeah, I think that's a great comment and something for us to be thinking about, because especially with our adjuncts, I guarantee you're not alone. They're like, hey, I got 80 other things to do. If there's some things you'd like me to know about this, please tell me. Otherwise, gotta do the stuff. So important comment. Okay, Wayne, you've now got 4 minutes, since I know you're always ready on the fly. Is there anything you want to add to this conversation to kind of wrap us up here?
Thanks, Joanna. I really appreciate the, if you will, the direction this conversation has gone and some of the things that have come up as part of it. I think what it underscores for me is the value and the opportunity that we have to come up with some training opportunities for faculty around a number of the things that we've been talking about. And I would say one of them is around any security concerns there may be. I appreciate, Joanna, that you brought up, compliance with FERPA and being careful about making sure you don't enter information that could be a violation or could result in a violation of FERPA laws. And so some training around that may be helpful. Certainly the notion of prompt engineering, as it's often referred to, figuring out how to engineer the best kind of prompt to get what you're looking for and how to refine those prompts to get a better result from AI. I think some training around that would be really helpful. And then maybe even just something that addresses what you raised, Doc, and some of the fundamentals, if you will, about AI and how the different forms that AI takes, because although we've had a lot of conversation and discussion around the use of Chat GPT, that's really only one form of AI and the uses of it. And just looking through the comments, I appreciate some of the comments there that point us to some of the very basic uses of AI that all of us are already using, whether we think about it or not. So, the predictive text on our phone, that's all a result of AI. And we've become accustomed to that. We know how it works, and we know how wrong it can be sometimes and how helpful it can be at other times. And so I think in the same way, as we dig more into how we can use AI in other ways as faculty, not just how our students use AI, but how we as faculty can use it, I'm sure there'll be opportunities to learn about those things. And I certainly am happy to support our finding ways to provide some of those training opportunities, for faculty as a whole. I foresee that it will be a continued part of our conversations going forward. I know as I've been planning out for the year ahead, it certainly features in some of the academic affairs community conversations, as well as faculty meetings and other opportunities that we have to meet together.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much for that. That's good kind of wrap on a good conversation. I have to appreciate a lot of the things that came up today. Thank you all for spending some of your lunch hour, depending on what time zone you're in, with us, and just for being willing to participate. These conversations wouldn't be any good if it was just, not that I don't love talking to Wayne, but if none of you all showed up and it was the two of us talking, we wouldn't get a lot further down the road than we have already been. So thank you so much for coming, sharing your ideas, being willing to participate and give up a little bit of your time to help us all build our knowledge. So I am going to stay right to our time frame so that hopefully if we do this again, we can convince you all to come back, knowing that it's going to be 45 minutes and on with your life. So appreciate it. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.